Thank you, everybody, for joining this webinar, this information session on our reopen request for applications for the ConnectALL deployment program. Joshua Breitbart, Senior Vice President for ConnectALL. Let's go to the next slide. So for today's session, it's being recorded. We will send out the recording and the slides to all participants, and we'll post it to our website. As we go through, we'll include relevant links in the meeting chat, and we'll also include those when we send it out. And please note you can submit questions through the Q&A function of the application here, or by email at connectalldeployment@esd.ny.gov. We'll not be responding to those questions live, but we will post them to the ConnectALL website and notify everybody who's on our email list. Thank you. Next slide. So we're focused again today on the ConnectALL deployment program. This is using funding from the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, specifically the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, to address unserved and underserved locations across the state that do not have other existing plans or enforceable commitments to address them. $644 million from that program is available through this RFA potentially, and it is those locations that are on the FCC map that are eligible for funding. We continue to make adjustments based on data, including provider service and enforceable commitments. So again, the number of locations has been updated. Next slide. Where we are in the program timeline as we proceed from the first RFA opening in December towards the submission of our final proposal to the Commerce Department, National Telecommunications and Information Administration, which is due July 25th. We reopened this request for applications on March 5th. Today is March 11th, and we're having our information session. And the deadline for this reopened RFA is March 28th. Next slide. Again, familiar generally with the request for applications. It's the things that really have changed to note overall, and we'll go through some of those key changes in this information session. Obviously, the deadline, March 28th, 2025, is of note. The eligible applicants are those that have already completed ConnectALL pre-qualification applications, but we remain focused on the same goal and the same outcomes. Next slide. Now, we're going to go through about 3 categories generally of some key changes to make note of compared to the first opened RFA. This focuses on a subset of project areas. In addition, it allows for flexibility in the proposed coverage percentage. The applicant can select any number of the locations within each project area that has been reopened. And we've streamlined the required application materials so that it is one application, and you can include responses for multiple project areas within that. And again, we'll go through the details for each one of these sets of changes. Let's go to the next slide. With respect to the project areas, there are 139 project areas in this reopened RFA, which includes 46,703 locations grouped within those 139 project areas. A select number are available only for priority broadband project proposals. Others are available for priority or reliable proposals. You should certainly refer to the project area list for those details. We still have an interactive map we can use to go through the project areas. And we continue to review the information that we receive, whether it's on locations that should not be considered as broadband serviceable or that already have service. Please continue to respond with that information through those channels. We'll include that when we send it out. we'll continue to evaluate any of the information and evidence that we receive through that process. Next slide. So one of the key differences is that for this, for the reopened RFA, we're seeking proposals with a maximum average cost per location of $30,000. So that is within each project area. So obviously that total amount for a project area changes based on the number of locations, but within the project area, the number of locations you select is up to you, but the total cost should have an average for that number of location of 30,000. So again, calculated as the total grant funding requested divided by the number of locations proposed to be served within the proposed project area. ConnectALL will not consider project proposals with an average cost per location above $30,000 through this RFA. And again, there's no 100% coverage percentage requirement for this round, for this RFA as it's reopened. Applicants are expected to maximize the number of locations included in the proposal that you can reach, staying within that average cost. So note that during the application evaluation process, we still may establish the minimum coverage percentage requirement for any project area and apply that to applications that we may have received, depending on the review process as we proceed with that. But in your application, you'll be able to select the number of locations and set the coverage percentage in your application, working within this parameter. Next slide. Again, priority broadband projects are those that provide end-to-end fiber solution. Reliable broadband projects can include other technologies. You should refer to the request for applications for the details on those. Applicants should be familiar with this part of it already. But again, just note that some project areas are only eligible for priority broadband projects proposals, while others include both options for you to apply. Next slide. Gonna go through the application structure. That has changed some. So again, the pre-qualification application is not being submitted at this point. Anybody who's eligible will have already submitted the pre-qualification application at this stage. And there'll be one project area application for each applicant that include multiple project areas. So let's go to the next slide. So again, conditionally pre-qualified applicants who need to submit revisions and update information should still proceed to do that. But you're not submitting a new pre-qualification application at this point. Next slide. You submit a project area application, meaning you're submitting one application. It can address multiple project areas. ConnectALL is doing our evaluation and our scoring and awards through this RFA on a project area basis. But again, one application will be able to include priority broadband proposals and reliable or reliable proposals for any number of the eligible and available project areas within a single application. So we would not need to go through the cloning process for each separate application at this point for this RFA. The project areas will all be included in those workbooks. So go to the next slide. So again, you can submit either priority broadband proposal or reliable for the project areas that can do both, or you can submit both, one or the other or both. And then within each one of the workbooks, you'll be able to include any number of the project areas that you want to respond to. There is no limit to the number of project areas that you can include in the workbook in your application. If you are submitting for the 2 technology types, in that case, you will need 2 separate project workbooks. But for the priority broadband project workbook, that will include all the project areas that are available. And for the reliable broadband project workbook, that will include those project areas that are eligible for reliable proposals, and it'll include all of those. So again, if you're doing both technologies, 2 workbooks, you're doing just one workbook or the other, and that will include all of the project areas that you want to respond to. And then within each project area, you will indicate which of the locations you are responding to in that project area. And again, there's not a minimum percentage for this RFA at this point for your response within each one of the project areas. So just to recap, locations within the project area, project areas are within the technology type workbook, 1 or 2 workbooks within a single application. Next slide. Application components generally are the same as before, with a couple of differences. But the real key to keep in mind is now it's just one package of those components for a single application that will apply across all of the project areas that you're responding to, all the locations within those project areas. So again, the things that have changed is the project proposal type. Before, you were choosing whether it was a 100%, a secondary, or a tertiary percentage. Now it is only priority or reliable, and the applicant is defining the coverage percentage in the application at this stage in the process. The items that are in bold are the ones that are submitted as attachments in the Documents tab of the CFA application. If you need a refresher of how to navigate through the Consolidated Funding Application portal, refer you back to the initial information session, which walked through that. And again, it's similar, except the cloning. Now you don't have to go through the cloning process because it's just this one application. Next slide. Other application components that have some changes is that the several application templates that were separate documents, were separate uploaded before, are now consolidated into a single workbook. And you have that ability to submit for multiple project areas. Also, when it comes to the network design, if you need a network design for priority, a separate one for reliable, or just one if you're only submitting that technology type. But only one design is required per technology type to cover all of the proposed locations within all of the proposed project areas. But your network design is just one network design that will cover all of those. And then under the financial security letter of commitment, as we had further advised in Q&A process, now we've clarified it in the application. Only one letter, in this case, also only one letter is required. That should be for the highest cost project area of all the project areas that you're responding to. The detailed cost proposal and the pro forma templates are not required by the March 28th deadline. Those will be required during the award process. Similarly, the demonstrations of support from local, county, or tribal nation governments are optional, and those can be submitted by the March 28th deadline, but they also can be submitted by email until April 11th. So you have 2 additional weeks after you've submitted by the March 28th deadline to communicate with county governments or tribal nation governments or other letters of support. If you need contact information for tribal nations or counties in order to share information and solicit those letters of support, you can reach out to us and we can facilitate that for any applicant that wants to make that presentation and seek those letters of support. And again, those would be can be submitted to ConnectALL by email until April 11th. Please, in the RFA, you'll see how to make sure that it's properly labeled to attach to the application in the particular project area that you're responding to. Next slide. Additional reference materials are available on the ConnectALL website. As always, we provide instructions and checklists for you. There's the project area list, changelog that indicate any updates to the project areas in terms of the eligible locations within the project area, number of other materials, the Q&A materials. We will respond to any of your questions and post that there. And again, as we make changes, we'll generally keep you informed by email to remind you to look at that. But please continue to check that or reach out to us if you've got any questions about that. Next slide. So this is just a little bit more of a reminder of how to identify the locations within the project areas, review the eligible location list to see all of the eligible locations in the state and their associated project area ID numbers. Again, you can respond to any of the locations that are included in this RFA. But again, they're still being grouped within the project areas that they are assigned to. And so you can indicate the project areas included in your application on the project area ID input tab of the workbook. And then you complete all the appropriate fields in the workbook for the project areas included in your application. Indicate which of the locations that you're responding to, and then you upload that project workbook. Again, one for priority, one for reliable, or both in your single application within the in the portal. Next slide. As always, or as we've done it, the applications must be submitted through the Consolidated Funding Application portal. So you already have a login for that. You already have your pre-qualification number to associate with this this application to fill out that part of the field once you log in and begin your application. Next slide. In this case, the project location, which is the sort of front door to the application process, is not relevant for this application because, again, you can select project areas to include within one application from across the state of what's been included in this RFA. So select any region and proceed the application to continue. It has no bearing on the application. It's just the way to enter in. Next slide. By the same token, at the end, the review page, which asks you to put a click on the any location on the map. You can click any location on the map, just make sure it's in the state of New York, because that's our preference, is state of New York. And then hit submit, and just remember, this is the page where once you hit submit, you will not be able to make any changes after that. So tee everything up, you can work through your proposal, and just make sure you hit submit by the deadline. But again, it does not impact your application where you click on the map before hitting submit as part of the review page. Next slide. So as I said before, our initial review, in addition to make sure everything is complete in the application, we'll determine whether minimum coverage percentages must be applied or adjusted or established for each project area, and request revised proposals as needed. And then as required under the program, we will still review the priority broadband projects first before reviewing the reliable broadband projects within each of the technology types, and where we've received competitive applications for the same project area and the locations within the project area, we'll score the applications accordingly with the same scoring criteria we used before, as we established in our initial proposal, and that we used in have already used in this RFA to determine the top scoring application. And again, just in your application, maximize the number of locations that you can include up to the parameters that we've established. And we may request proposals for additional coverage percentages and or technology types at a later date. Next slide. This is a refresher. It's the same scoring criteria that we've applied in terms of how it applies to the priority proposals and the reliable proposals within each one of the categories. It's the same point allocation within each of these technology types. Next slide. And then just a reminder of the timeline where we are in the process. Submit the application by the March 28th deadline. We will proceed with additional solicitations if necessary. And we are moving towards the completion of our final proposal by July 25th. As we proceed with the review and the additional solicitations, we may reach out to applicants for clarifications or to engage in negotiations, or again, proceed towards that final proposal on that's due to NTIA on July 25th. Next slide. Again, if you have any questions, you can send them by email to connectall@esd.ny.gov. We review the questions, prepare the answers, put them up on our website, and notify you by email. Again, any questions at all, please email us. Thank you again for your time and attention and your continued partnership in progressing towards the goal of the deployment program. And thank you for your time today. And we'll